من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد مبارك صلوا عليه صلاة وسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. So, last 3 weeks we've been talking about Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and we'll continue with that today. And last week was more of a reiteration of what I had said the week before, which is a very important aspect to understand. And as we've said, the focus of what we're talking about is the attitude of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and towards the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because these are people that we want to emulate, and if we don't know why they were doing what they did, then how are we going to emulate them? It's one thing to copy somebody. Okay, yeah, they do something, and I copy them, and even there, that's a significant aspect. That's important. But if I'm doing things without truly understanding it, if I'm by myself, I'm fine. But, the problem comes, and this is where you see a lot of people who grew up in households, in Muslim households, where the aqidah or the way of belief was proper, and they grew up doing those things, but they never understood why they were doing what they were doing. And so they go into other places where, and especially people who got jobs somewhere in a Gulf country or someplace, and now suddenly they see these people whose aqidah or belief system is messed up, even though superficially, yeah, it looks like Islam. But the whole emphasis is, in reality, taking the soul out of the religion. And because they never understood why they were doing what they were doing, they get there and they're told all of this is wrong. And, and it doesn't take much for them to get lost. And you get these people coming back and they're telling you about, oh, this is haram and that's shirk and everything else. So that's why even when we talk about the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the attitude, the intention behind what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, and especially their connection to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is really what makes them those companions. And Abu Bakr, of course, is amongst the best of the companions. And so that's why I reiterated last week what I'd spoken about the week before, because, that shows us his attitude. When even this worst of the worst disbeliever comes and tells him that, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is claiming that he went from Mecca to Jerusalem and back overnight, he had no hesitation in accepting it, to the extent that he says that, I see more miraculous things from him every day. What you're telling me is nothing compared to what I see from him every day. Because the attitude of most of the people today is the opposite. You talk about some of the miracles of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and suddenly, this must be shirk. And I can't accept that. Well, that was the attitude of the hypocrites of the time, not of the believers of the time, who were the real believers. So moving forward from there, when we look at him, Abu Bakr RA. Again, as I said, Rasulullah trusted him to go and wean out the tribes when they were making plans for the immigration. And as I said last week, again, Rasulullah already knew where he was going, but he's establishing things. He's showing us how to deal with situations. And at the same time, he's establishing so on the day of judgment, no one could turn around and say, oh, you know, if he had come to us, we would have taken him in. Well, he did come to you, and you rejected him. You know, the only people that took him in were the Ansar of Medina Munawwara. So, you know, when the plans are finally made for the immigration, you know, the people of Medina, they give the pledge at Aqaba. And so now it's time to go. Rasulullah starts sending everybody, you know, slowly, and people, you know, they would, you know, everything would be normal during the day, and you know, everybody went to bed at night normally, and you wake up the next morning and oh, this house is empty because they got out. Because if they tried to leave openly, then Quraysh would have stopped them. And you have to understand here also, most of these people who have accepted Islam, they have accepted Islam at a very high cost from a worldly standpoint. And for them, of course, they didn't think of it as that. Most of those Muslims who were new, the vast majority of their relatives were not Muslim. So you have households where one person's a Muslim, or one family amongst the whole clan is a Muslim. And so now if they try to do anything, that whole clan is going to come and stop them. And so this is why, again, you know, they wouldn't let on to anything. And then suddenly they were gone. Until the only two households that are left in Medina Munawwara, as far as all of those who could immigrate. Those who were slaves, of course, they couldn't immigrate because they were, you know, forcibly kept. There were people who weren't slaves, but their families basically put them under house arrest, so they couldn't go. So now you have two households that are left. The household of Rasulullah ﷺ and the household of Abu Bakr RA. So, of course, this is when Quraysh starts making their plans because they know, okay, you know, he's about to leave. We got to do something before he leaves, because if he leaves, you know, who knows what will happen. And this is interesting, you know, the narration is mentioned in Imam Ahmad's Musnad, you know, that Quraysh, before the Hijrah, are having this meeting at Darul Nadwa. This is their meeting hall. It was known as Darul Nadwa. And they're trying to figure out what to do with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they can't figure this out, you know, because you have people there at the meeting who, you know, no one wants war. And that's what they're afraid of. If they go and they do something, then Banu Hashim will retaliate, and you're going to have a civil war within Quraysh. So there are no agreements, and while they're meeting, there's a knock at the door. And they open the door, and this guy who's dressed in Najdi clothes. Najd, of course, is Eastern Arabia. Riyadh, modern day Riyadh, is really the center of Najd, what was then Najd, and it's still Najd. That's why when you listen to the names of their scholars, so-and-so an-Najdi, you know, Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab an-Najdi, Abdul Aziz bin Baz an-Najdi, so that's who they are. So when they open the door, again, this guy, he's dressed in Najdi clothes, doesn't look like he's traveled from anywhere. Of course, a guy came from Najd. I mean, he should have some signs of travel, no signs of travel. They ask him, who are you? And he says, I'm Sheikhun Najd. So he said, what's going on? We're having a meeting. We got this man here. He claims to be a prophet, and he's caused all this uproar in our society. He's changed our way of life. Common arguments. So he says, well, let me come in and help you. Okay, come on. Abu Jahl, of course, is leading the meeting. And Abu Jahl, when he sees this man, he says, this must be my brother. Come and sit next to me. So now he says, okay, give us, so they ask him, what do you think we should do? Which is all strange because, okay, this is the guy, they don't even know him, and they're asking, what do you think we should do? Birds of the feather flock together. This is why sometimes, in this world, you see somebody, you've never met them, but you feel like, oh, I know them. Because you knew each other in the world of souls. So when you come to this world, even though in this world you've never met, but there's that connection. It's just that okay, because you knew each other then. So same thing here. Abu Jahl, he knows this guy. It is Shaitan. It is Iblis coming in the form. So he says, you tell us, what should we do? He said, no, you. And so he tells them, he said, no, y'all make suggestions and we'll think about it. Then we'll see. So one guy, he says, let's imprison him. Let's capture him and imprison him. And that way he can't go anywhere. And Sheikhun Najd, he says, and Abu Jahl agrees, because both of them say, if we do that, all of his followers, they will eventually come and create an issue and break him out, and they'll be fighting and bloodshed, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So then another one, he says, well, let's kill him. Well, again, that's what we're trying to avoid altogether. Because if one of us goes and kills him, you're going to have civil war. Even those from Banu Hashim and Banu Muttalib who are not Muslim will fight because you killed one of their men. So finally Abu Jahl says, let's take a man from every clan and stand outside his door, and as soon as he exits, everyone strikes him at once. That way, Banu Hashim, that way the blame is distributed amongst everybody, all the clans. And Banu Hashim, they can't fight all the clans all at once. And so they'll be forced to settle on blood money, which we will happily pay. And Sheikhun Najd says, this is the plan. This is it. So in the meantime, this is going on. And while this is going on, over here, Rasulullah and Abu Bakr, they are making plans. And of course, the plan of Rasulullah is the plan of Allah. And makaru wa makar Allah wallahu khairul makirin. They scheme and connive. And Allah has His plan, and Allah's plan is the best. So of course, the plan is set, and I'm not going to go into all the details here. So Abu Bakr RA is to leave with Rasulullah. Ali RA is to sleep on the bed of Rasulullah. So that way, when he leaves, if Quraysh look into the house, they think, oh, somebody's still there. There are several interesting points here. One is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you read about his description, everyone said he was medium height. He wasn't too tall, he wasn't too short. One of his miracles, however, is that it doesn't matter who stood next to him, and no matter how tall they were, they only came up to his shoulder. He never had to look up at anybody. Everybody else looked up to him. Ali, if you read his description, amongst the Arabs at the time, he was considered short. Not short, but shorter than most people. When Ali is sleeping in that bed, Quraysh are looking in. They can't tell. And to understand this point, we have to jump a little bit forward. When Abu Bakr and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrive in Quba after the Hijrah, everybody comes running up to Abu Bakr rather than to greet him, thinking that he is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And people will tell you that, oh, they did this because Abu Bakr, rather he looked older, so they assumed that he was the messenger. The problem with that is that there are people there who had seen Abu Bakr before, they knew Abu Bakr. And they can't tell. And this gets back to in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Sibghat Allah wa man ahsanu min Allahi sibgha. And this is an address to the believers that take on the colors, if you take the literal translation, take on the color of Allah, and whose color is better than Allah's. Allah is free from color. This is metaphorical speech. Telling you to take on the characteristics of Allah. Allah is merciful. We should also be merciful. Allah is the truth. We should also be truthful. Allah is justice. We should also be just. So this is what that's talking about. Ali radhiyallahu slept on the chest of Rasulullah from the time he was 3 years old. Forward. The interaction there. The first nourishment he received was the saliva directly from the tongue of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we can't even imagine how he took on the colors of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr, during this trip, and even before this trip, of course, every moment he spent with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And on this trip, they are in that cave together for three days. So again, we can't imagine the transfer of the characteristics. So now when they see him, they can't tell who's who. So here also with Ali, they couldn't tell who is who, even though the descriptions are not the same. Of course, Quraysh, in the meantime, Quraysh are lining up outside the house. Ali is getting ready to lay in the bed. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, this is dark night. It's like the end of the month of Safar. Moon is not out. The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam leaves the house and walks through this basically small army of men waiting to kill him. And as he's walking through them, he's placing sand on the heads of each one. And he's reciting the verse from Surah Yasin, وَجَعَلْنَا مِن بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَجَعَلْنَا مِن بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the disbelievers as far as being, not being deaf and dumb. And he recites this as he's walking through. The next morning, when they're still waiting on him to come out and no one's come out, so they open the door and rush in, and they see Ali there. But they also realize all this sand on their heads. How did that get there? After Rasulullah SAW leaves, he and Abu Bakr get together, they go to the cave, they stay in the cave. And it's interesting, everybody knew that he's going to go to Yathrib, to Medina, which is north of Mecca. Thawr, the cave, is south. And the cave is not very far from the Kaaba. For those who've been to Mecca, it's, if you go outside of the masjid as they built it up now, it's like maybe a couple of 100 yards out. It's not very far from the Kaaba. When they barged in that morning and they find Ali radiallahu there, and then they get upset and run, now there's a bounty placed on their heads. 100 camels, dead or alive, preferably dead. For anyone who captures, and 100 camels each. And you have to understand, at that time, anyone who had 100 camels was like a millionaire. So of course now you have everybody looking. And Quraysh is looking. And if you've ever been to Thawr, it's a cave that has holes in it. And when they arrived at the gate of the cave, or the opening of the cave, Abu Bakr, he says to Rasulullah, he says, you wait here, let me go in and clean it out. Make sure there's nothing, no bugs, no scorpions, nothing that might, do anything. Again, which is also very interesting. Because you got to keep reminding yourself, what's the time? This is the middle of the night, the darkest part of the night. There is no moonlight. They cannot light a fire, because if they light a fire, everybody will see them. Abu Bakr goes into the cave and cleans it out, and he patches up any of the holes. I mean, you walk into a room in your house without the lights on, you're going to be stumbling all over the place, even though you've been in that room 100 times. Abu Bakr walks into this cave in the middle of the night, no light, cleans it out, makes sure there's nothing in there, blocks up all the holes with the exception of one, because he ran out of cloth. And he comes out and he says, Ya Rasulullah, let's go in now. How did he see everything? Again, that connection to Rasulullah. How do you see? In order to be able to see, you have to have light. There has to be nur. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran. قَدْ جَاءَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ نُورٌ وَكِتَابٌ مُبِينٌ. And there has come to you from Allah the nur and the Kitabun Mubin. Because if you're going to read a book, you have to have light. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the light first, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he sent the book. The connection of Abu Bakr with that light of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is what allowed him to see. If you, Abu Qatada, or Qatada radiallahu anhu, in the Battle of Uhud, one of his eyes is knocked out, but it's dangling by the optic nerve. And the companions are about to cut it. Because there's no way they can save this eye, they're going to cut it out. And Rasulullah stops them. And he goes over, and he, with his own blessed hand, places that eye back into its socket. And Qatada could see better with that eye than he could with the other eye. To the extent that he could see at night like he could see in the day with that eye. These are minor points that I keep bringing up, but they're not really minor. But they're points that people overlook. And that's why I'm emphasizing them. Because they make us appreciate the connection of Abu Bakr to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they make us appreciate the significance and the miracle that is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he places all of this, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walks in. I'm going to skip over a few points that I'll come back to next week, inshallah, because I want to get to a certain point. The next day, of course, Quraysh are looking, and everybody is looking, to the extent that they come to the cave. They walk up to the cave. And when they get to the cave, there's this perfect spider web that's spun on the door of the cave, the opening of the cave. And there's a pigeon nest with some eggs and a pigeon sitting on it, or sitting on the eggs in the nest. And they think to them, there's no way anybody, if somebody had walked through, there's no way they can be in there because the web is perfect. Somebody had walked through, they would have broken the web. When a spider, fixes a broken web, it's not that perfect design. So there's no way they're in there. So they didn't even go in. Abu Bakr RA can see their feet from underneath because there are parts of the cave where you could, kind of like openings where he could see their feet. And of course he's saying, he's whispering to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, they're going to see us. They're going to see us. Abu Bakr, if you read verse 40 of Surah Tawbah, this verse was revealed much later, but talks about this incident. It was revealed in Medina Munawwara, addressing the hypocrites. And if you read the beginning of the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you don't help him, it doesn't matter. If you don't help Rasulullah, it doesn't matter. Allah helped him when he was taken out of his city. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Abu Bakr as Sahabi. He is the only companion of Rasulullah whose companionship can be directly proven through the Quran. Because he's saying, Ya Rasulullah, they'll see us. And Rasulullah responds to him. He says, and it's mentioned in that verse. Rasulullah says what? He says, La tahzan, inna Allah ma'ana. Do not grieve. Allah is with us. And many significant aspects of this. If we look in Surah Shu'ara, Surah number 26, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about various prophets in that surah, and he also talks about Musa alayhi salam. And he talks about when Musa alayhi salam is taking Bani Israel out of Egypt. And of course, as they're leaving, the Pharaoh and his army are coming, chasing them. And they get to a certain point, they can see this army coming, and they start saying to Musa alayhi salam, oh, we're dead, they're going to catch up with us, this is it. And basically saying, oh, you've destroyed us. We were better off there, This is their attitude. We were better off where we were. You just destroyed us. They're going to come and kill us all. Musa alayhi salam, what does he say to them? He says, Kalla, never. Inna ma'aya Rabbi sayahdeen. He says, indeed, my Rabb is with me. Or with me is my Lord. He doesn't include them any at all. Here, Rasulullah says what? La tahzan, inna Allah ma'ana. Allah is with us. The other thing that he says, he doesn't say La takhaf. He doesn't say don't fear, because khawf, you can fear for someone else. I mean, you fear for yourself. Abu Bakr RA wasn't concerned about himself. He wasn't worried about what Quraysh would do with him if they saw them. He's worried about what Quraysh will do to Rasulullah if they catch them. He wasn't, again, not worried. Bani Israel are worried about themselves. Abu Bakr RA is worried about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Rasulullah says, La tahzan, don't grieve. Allah is, inna Allah ma'ana. Indeed, Allah is with us. I'll end here today. Inshallah, we'll kind of cover some other aspects of the hijrah. And again, this shows us the understanding of Abu Bakr and the attitude. Again, Abu Bakr, even here, he's not worried about himself. His connection to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us, and may He fill our hearts with His love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may He give strength and protection and victory to our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine and wherever the Muslims are being oppressed over their oppressors. Those who have not made sunnah, go and make sunnah.